Hello everyone and welcome to Phoenix Gaming. I hope you are doing well today. We're doing something a little bit different this time around. I actually played a couple games, 4 games of Scythe consecutively at my house yesterday in preparation for WBC. It's a little bit silly, I think, because I practiced with myself and 2 of the other best players that have won this event several times. So we're all just making each other even better at the game anyway. But we wanted to practice with the modular boards, something that I think really breathes a lot of fresh life into the Scythe metagame, because you're not just playing sort of the established structures that are on the board of like where your player starts are, and it really changes how to evaluate each of the factions. Scythe is a lovely, wonderful game, but it is deeply imbalanced. We are playing with a bidding mechanism here. And at the beginning of this game, when we're going to kick off here, we have already bid. I tried 3 different cameras and 3 different camera angles. One of my cameras didn't work. I don't have great equipment, so we're just testing this out to see if this is something that I actually want to commit to, do this more in the future. So if you like this kind of video, if you have an opinion on, I'm going to do 2 games, 2 different cameras in those games. If you have an opinion about which one is more readable, I would certainly love that input in the comments. Let me know what's working for you, what's not working for you, or if this format really just isn't beneficial because of the visibility problems and the fact that I'm not a professional camera person at all. But this is something I want to consider doing in the future. Having a new house and everything gives me the leisure of making setups like this and having additional space to do things like that. But as you can see, not super professional. This was a webcam dangling from the inside of the light, which is what's causing all that glare in the middle. I blasted it with a bunch of gamma, but you're gonna have a hard time seeing the center of the board. Fortunately, the table meta that we're playing with here, people are definitely very economical, and so you're going to see a lot more home board action than anything else. Obviously, we also can't quite see the red board in the bottom left or the white board that's like straight at the top of the camera here, but I do have a list of the actions here that I'll walk through as we're playing the game. We're also playing this game at 33% advanced speed, so just be aware of that. And I'm going to run through the setup, and then we're going to go ahead and dive into the game. So let's, without any further ado, start talking about the various factions. So in seat 1 is always the industrial seat. We've got Crimea. So Crimea sitting kind of at the bottom of the board. I end up playing Crimea in this game, and industrial is not necessarily the best board for Crimea, or I think even in general, people don't super love the like constant upgrading. It's having to do 6 upgrades just means that it's a lot more work to get that star. But you want to upgrade because it's obviously a nice little action, but it's also 3 coins on this board. So that's a little bit awkward. Having to produce on the mechs is really nice. Those $2 there makes a big difference. So that's what you're going to be paying attention to. Can I do things with oil? Can I do things with metal while I'm playing this? Crimea is generally a dirty faction. The ability to turn cards into resources is just extremely powerful. And Crimea here we see is sitting on a village to start off with, so they can really get that worker up as fast as possible. Now you'll note that Crimea does not have that metal or oil on their starting island that we mentioned. They actually have access to the 2 other resources, which is incredibly awkward for what the industrial board wants to do. And I think that made people pretty wary about playing Crimea. I ended up actually taking this for a bid of 0 at the end of the day, which I think is absolutely a mistake. I think Crimea almost should never go for 0, especially sitting in the first seat. This was our first game of the day, so I think we just weren't in the mode of bidding quite yet. But we did bid a lot on this second faction. So Rusviet, or I'll probably just call them Russia quite often, was the mechanical board. And we can see that they are right at the top, kind of on the left side of the board, actually. Top left if you're looking at it from the bottom. And they are sitting there on an island that has wood and metal and is also very, very close to a village. So that's pretty nice. Some options there. And this mechanical board is one that is not one of my favorites. I don't like the 2-2-2 a ton. I like to have a little bit more direction. And I also like to throw a few upgrades in the game. But as I just mentioned, a lot of people don't like doing those upgrades. So this board's actually rewarding you for doing literally everything else in that game. This faction ended up going for 7 as the high bid in the game. And we'll see how that works out for them. In the third seat here, we have the Nordic Patriots. The Nordic Patriots were the other popular bid on faction in this game. Part of it is they started right up there on a village again, and with metal, which is perfect for the Patriot board, which is going to be needing that metal to get those extra coins for throwing out those mechs early. The Produce is sitting there on the enlist action, so they're looking to get their way to some food, which they can swim across the river there and get onto that food. It's a little bit dangerous because it's on a tunnel, but they have a handful of options from there, and they can also just, without even building their sort of lake mechs or their riverwalk mechs, slide on down into the wood and food there. So tons of access to resources. This ended up going for 3, which I think is not too unreasonable. I do think it was one of the better factions. I do think in general, yellow and red are the strongest factions. We'll see that as a recurring theme. Their inherent powers are just really good, and or their mechs. Blue oftentimes is one of the weaker factions, but I actually end up playing blue quite a lot because I am generally a low bidder in games. So I let people fight over the big factions, and I play the weenie factions. In fourth slot here, we've got Agricultural Polania, just normally a nice little combo for them. They can, do that enlist action, the produce action, just a very economic approach to the game rather than a violent approach to the game. They can kind of go around like collecting their events and things like that. But you see up here, they don't have a ton of events. I think there is one in the glare there, but they are sort of sequestered in the top part of the board. They do have a village, which is really nice for them. But being on the oil there, as we see, is not ideal necessarily for agricultural board with just 1 coin there. And they're going to be a little bit choked up because they are also neighbors in seat 5 with Saxony. That's on the engineering board, where they're going to want to be using wood and oil a lot to get those buildings. And you see that they start on wood and metal, I think that is. So they can access mechs, which is not all that rewarded for Saxony right now. Both of those ended up going for 0, which I think is entirely appropriate. I think that Polania is just kind of jammed up in the corner of the board. Saxony is going last in this game and doesn't necessarily have the greatest setup in terms of getting more workers, although that actually is a village right there. I can't quite tell if there's a river in the middle. We're going to say that it's not, or we'll see how it goes over the course of the game. I do think that I got away with robbery in the draft here. Without any further ado, let's start rolling, and let's see if I can keep up with this 33% speed. We are probably still doing a little bit of setup. I tried to get this to the right moment. We're going to start any second now. Let me just talk briefly, I guess, while this is going, while it's getting to where it needs to be, about each of the factions. So Crimea, like I said, they don't start with any combat cards, but they can use combat cards to essentially work as one resource at a given time. So finding a way to do that is really, really important. Now, I mentioned that I want to make sure that I get some mechs. Mechs give you a lot of special powers, and also they are worth 2 gold each. They're on my produce action here. And so you see me leading off with taking a trade action to pick up those 2 metal right off the bat. After that, we've got, we're going to have a sequence of moves. We're going to see Russia move out and get onto that village there. I find that oftentimes if there's a village 1 space away from the center, you can sort of count on your first turn for a lot of folks is doing exactly that kind of thing. We see the Nords are going to move out. They're going to claim that food space that we were talking about before and move their leader out to where it's, I think that's maybe trying to get closer to an event, although it's a little bit curious there in the center. I guess they're planning on getting mechy so they can go across the water. Not the most exciting spot for their guy, but they do want to be making that food early is what it looks like. Polania leads off with a produce. Makes a lot of sense, getting an oil, getting that extra worker. And we see another move here from Saxony, who moves also onto a village. I quickly follow that up with a produce action of my own where I make some babies and a little bit of food. We see a produce action for the Russians. Everybody is trying to get that third worker. Third worker is absolutely free. And you're going to see people rushing the 5 and 8 workers as fast as possible. Just makes those actions like, yes, you have to pay for them, but they're just so much more efficient. We're going to see the Nords produce getting their third worker. And I'm sure that when we get to the Saxons' turn, we're going to see the same kind of thing. We see a trade over in Polania land. They're trying to get themselves that oil so they can do a bunch of upgrading early and just move around, making sure that kind of stuff is happening over there. Saxons do indeed expand out their construction. And then I think on me, turn 3 here, we're going to see me flip on back to a trade action, scooping up those extra metal that I'm going to need next time I produce. I'm going to be able to build a mech on turn 4, which is pretty nice. Russians are going to, or Rustviets are going to cheat and use I can do the same action again, scooping up their fifth workers. And then was that a trade from the Nords? I think that was a trade from the Nords. I can't quite see what they took there though. And we have a follow-up move from Polania, who did an upgrade. Now, I don't have a detail of what their upgrades are, but there are kind of common upgrades, like the move, maybe the produce action, the bolster action, tend to be the 3 actions that get upgraded first by almost all players. They seem to just be a lot better than those actions. You're not often increasing your hearts by 2 or, getting 2 coins, the move action or anything like that. We see the Saxons coming out and grabbing an event with their move, making sure that they're just sort of getting there before the Polanians can, which is a little bit of a bummer for them. They obviously like those events a lot more than the Saxons do. And then contemplating what the events are here. I don't have records of what the events are. We're not going to be able to see that. So we'll talk just broadly about events. The events, I think, are quite swingy in this game. It really comes down to sort of like, usually I think the top or bottom action. Top action is like free stuff. The bottom action is like pay something pretty hefty for a pretty exciting reward. And at this stage of the game, you're really hoping that some exciting reward is what you want at the bottom. That middle option of like paying a little bit of something to get some like medium, like not as exciting rewards is always a viable option. And it looks here, like actually that is what happens. I think it's probably like a pay some money for power on the Saxon side of things. We're going to see me as Crimea. I make a produce action and I build a mech directly on that village. So now I've got my 5 workers, a magic number, and I put out my speed mech. I do that so the 2 move is just really powerful. I'll also admit that I did that because I did not see the river in this game that is between the oil and the wood. I kind of thought that I would just have free range of the board, but you'll see me foolishly make that mistake in a second. We see the Russians here move out to collect an event. And then did they move? Oh yeah, they moved one of their workers over to metal to increase their metal production, which makes a lot of sense. They want to be able to start pumping out those mechs and they just don't have the way of getting quite enough resources yet. Russia, again, is playing this board, so they actually really only are going to need 3 metal, but they're ultimately going to be building a lot more than just 1 mech, obviously. Looks like they're assessing their event right now as well. And they are dropping down a bunch on popularity, and they end up taking... Oh, they get a mech reward. They spend some popularity in a mech reward. And this is a really unfortunate pull for the blue player, the Nords, Chris, because that river walk allows them to go and attack that poor Nord that's got food over there. But he doesn't want to disrupt his own plans of expanding out his workers. So despite the fact that that guy with the food is quite vulnerable, he decides to produce anyway, kind of keep it moving along. I'm not sure that I totally agree with that decision. I think that if you're going to build those workers, maybe not building the food, just acknowledging that you could be attacked across the Riverwalk there is something that you consider if you really want those employees. Another option could have been that he could have just moved out of there. He could have, used that tunnel to get to somewhere else that maybe would be a little bit farther away, a little bit safer, but it's not a lot of other moves he wants to do. So move doesn't feel like a great action for him, and that totally makes sense to me. Where are we at? We had a trade action, it looks like, for Polania. I didn't quite catch what exactly they did there. But then we had to produce over on Saxon side to get up to that magic 5 workers. And you're going to notice that is just a really, really common, like having 5 workers paying 1 power for that increased production is just so powerful. You're going to see me here doing very foolish moving 2s across rivers, and I just can't read the board. So I'm going to have to undo that entire thing. I still can actually move 2 with my center guy to claim that wooden, the lumber event, which I think is what I end up audibling to doing. But it's a little bit less exciting. I need to figure out how I'm going to get across the river here, because I need to either build something, like build a mine that lets me get across the river, or build another mech that lets me get across the river. The mech that we could build would be reasonable. We have a Riverwalk mech that lets us get to the oil that we just tried to cheatily jump to. But another option could be moving our workers around. This is somewhere where I think that I'm not quite super familiar with what the best choice is in the game, whether to go straight from 5 to 8 workers or to use 5 workers for a while. I tend to be greedy. I tend to just want the 5 workers. I want that like a semi-efficient production for as long as possible, but not paying the popularity in the coin, which tends to be really difficult to the point of like not even being able to produce for some people unless they find some other way to get that popularity. So I like to stay at 5 for quite a while. So I often end up moving my guys to make that happen. And it looks like I'm deciding here that I maybe don't want to do that. I'm a little bit surprised. I feel like actually getting that wood and making some buildings is going to be one of my options for getting out of here. I'm not amazing at that, but yeah, here I go taking 3 guys with me. I completely abandoned that village there, which is maybe a bad call in the long term, but I want to be more efficiently producing. In the meanwhile, having like a 1-1-3 split while I haven't done any upgrades doesn't feel so great. I'm not going to be upgrading for a while, so making 2 food and 3 wood is going to be a little bit better for me. That being said, that food is not so exciting, right? Like that enlist action there is not doing a whole lot for me. So it's only going to be there if essentially I'm continuing to trade for metal so I can build those mechs, which is not the most efficient way to be doing that because I'd like to be doing it off the produce action, but that is the downside of having a island that does not match your primary resources there, which is why you saw me thinking about that decision for quite a long time. Here we see the Russians coming in and nabbing the poor guy there. They don't even have to pay the popularity because they already went to 0 from their event. So pretty nice nab for the Russians. They get up into that food land, which is going to allow them to just produce and enlist constantly, making them very, very efficient as their neighbors are going to be doing things. As they look at themselves and their neighbors, they've got an industrial neighbor, themselves, of course, and a patriotic neighbor. So they're probably going to be looking at making it that there's going to be a lot of mech actions around them. So they're going to be making sure that they get those points along the way there. Let's see. That was a move. I think we have a bolster and an enlist from the Nords. Nope, sorry. It was a trade from the Nords. And it was a bolster and an enlist actually that's happening right now with the Polanians. Looks like he takes 2 power with the immediate reward. I'm not quite sure what his enlist was for his neighbors, but looks like we've got neighbors that do mechy things, producey things, or enlisty things, buildings. So probably not upgrade, probably one of the other 3 options. It depends a little bit on the resources that people have right now. Like his 2 neighbors both are just very heavy on their villages. So he's kind of got a big brain and estimate what he thinks it is that other people are going to be doing along the way. We see a trade action from the Germans here. What is Saxony trying to pull off? Is that some metal, I think? I think they're just trying to efficiently get a mech out. Here's a trade action from me, getting that metal that I'm realizing I absolutely need to get out of this space. And then we're going to see, as soon as I finish my turn here, I'm doing an enlist here as well. And I've decided to do the enlist where I get cards, draw 2 cards off the top of the deck. This is going to start essentially the engine of having free resources, which is going to help solve a lot of my problems along the way. The Russians are going to do what the Russviets are going to do what the Russviets do best, which is just the same action over and over again. We're going to see them start essentially doing this like crazy produce enlist combo that they have going on there. And just in time, I get rewarded for that enlistment of the enlistment. So I'm going to get those extra cards to be able to pay for all the stuff I want to do throughout the course of the game. But it's really especially nice for the Rustviets, who are going to get essentially all of their enlistments out pretty quickly, pretty early, over the course of the next several turns. Going to put them in a really powerful position. The one thing they have to watch for is that they're pretty low on power, but they're going to be able to use one of those enlistments to get 2 power back. So they're going to be able to keep this cycle going for a while. Looks like we get a mech build over in Nordland. I don't quite see what mech that is, but I suspect it's either speed. It could also be lakes, but I think it's probably speed, because now he can take those workers and go wherever he wants to go with them. Trade action over in Saxony land. In Polania land. And then a move and enlist from the Germans, which is going to give me yet another card. Could not have been a moment too soon with that enlist action there for myself. And we see the Saxons being the first people to cross the 7 threshold, making themselves at maximal combat capacity at this stage. We're going to produce over in Crimea, but I think not quite have enough metal to build a mech just yet. Oh, we do, because we have our second metal, thanks to the, I think, a preceding trade action, and we used a card to make the third one. So now we actually have the mech that allows us to river walk, and now we actually have access to the other parts of the board, which is pretty exciting. So that was we're going to see another produce and list over in the Rustviet. They're going to have some pretty quick turns coming up. Another thing that I didn't mention in the setup part of this game, but I think that really benefits Crimea, that is really easy to undersell, I think, because of the flexibility of the mines on the map, is having a bunch of uncontested surrounding territory near you. Like, yes, people can access you through mines and things like that, but you can see just how jammed up everybody is up top at the beginning of the game. Polania is completely stuffed in there by Saxony. Like, they have to choose to attack if they want to. It's really awkward. It's going to cost them popularity to do that. At stages of the game where they maybe can't quite afford such a thing. We saw the Nords getting attacked by the Riverwalk of the Rustviets. It was maybe earlier than anticipated, but even still, just having that proximity is something that we learned over the course of the day is not to be understated. Having the freedom of land that Crimea has right now just makes it a lot more comfortable. So that was the Rustviet enlist action, which is why you see yellow getting a card there. And looks like they bumped themselves up on power, as we mentioned. We're going to see the Nords do exactly what we mentioned a moment ago. They got that speed mech, and they're going to get all of those workers over. So now that they can start producing and enlisting and getting those 2 coins along the way. Looks like we have a move upgrade from the Polanians here. Is that right? Maybe they did indeed enlist the upgrade power earlier, and that's why they're getting that power, because my notes do say move upgrade. I'm going to say that's correct. I don't see a lot of movement happening. I think they ended up moving those workers out of the village and into the oil, so it's kind of like a self-sustaining oil thing. It's unfortunately just a little bit awkward for them. This isn't the best kind of setup there, and we see like them really suffering from being jammed up there, right? Like, they can produce the oil, but it's not the thing that immediately they can't turn it into anything immediately. They then have to take the move action. They don't really have anywhere to move, and so they're just kind of stuck. I think that maybe having like gotten traded for some of that lumber and building a mine just to get out of that hole in the top there might have been the line that I would have taken as the white player here. Black here is producing, it looks like. Yes, and we see black makes a bunch of metal. Moving into turn 8, we have a move and a build on my part. So I'm going to use that lumber after sending my hero straight into the factory, which I don't know is always the best, but when you can get to the factory earlier, I like to see if it can shape my game plan going forward. I do think that the factory cards are a little bit underpowered. I think the factory is a triple territory, is its actually biggest benefit, but of course being there first just means you're prone to being attacked and someone else taking it away from you, since the game does favor attackers. But I get my my little dudes up into the oil place, which will allow me to finally start taking the bolster action, getting those 3 coins that I want. I don't know that I'm going to get a star, but still the efficiency of it is really nice. And once you do a couple upgrades as Crimea, you can just essentially take all your actions with only cards. It makes resources not as important, which is really nice and flexible. Looks like I decide to build myself a monument here. Monuments are the building that you take on the bolster action that increases your popularity. It's really, really important to build that building if you have indeed gone to 8 workers, because otherwise, how are you getting your popularity so that you can keep paying popularity for it? I also like it just as incidental value. If you can get to 7 popularity, it really does improve your scoring by your endgame scoring is, it's not a perfect science, but 33% better or something like that. It's pretty significant. Looks like I'm going to debate this factory card for a while. I remember from looking at them, there were a lot of factory cards that make mechs, but I don't really want to make mechs with my factory card because I want to get the 2 coins for paying the metal for the mechs, though admittedly it's a little bit hard for me to pay metal for mechs. What you're going to see me doing actually is making it so that I upgrade those mech spaces so that I can use cards to cut exactly that problem. And having traded for that metal earlier, using cards to make the difference and then using the upgrades, I'm going to be able to get away with not really having that much metal production or really any metal production, and still finish out my mech things. So I think half the cards in these factory cards were mech things. So I was just trying to decide what did seem exciting. I think I end up taking the one that allows me to recruit because I have 1 recruit in play already. It's a bunch of nice little bonuses for putting your recruits up into play. Even though it'd be a little bit later getting the other 3 in terms of the benefits I'm getting from my neighbors, it is persistent. It just lasts throughout the course of the game and you get an immediate bonus. So it felt like a good option at the time. I think it's pay coins to recruit. Maybe not pay coins. I think the other thing I was debating was whether I wanted to take a card that ate 2 different resources, because I realized I could do a card and a resource. And I don't really remember what the reward was, but yeah, there I am. 2 coins for recruit and power. This ends up being a tiny bit of a trap for me, I think, in retrospect, but it works okay. Looks like that's maybe a bolster. Yeah, we get a bolster and a mech over from the Rustviets here. I think that might, rather than doing a produce and enlist, I think that they're just not pressured, and they figure they can kind of do that produce and list the rest of that loop a little bit later. They want to try to get themselves into a position where they have these mechs. I assume that they probably took the speed mech since they have the Riverwalk already. They don't especially need either of the other 2. We see a bunch of Nordic farmers up here going ahead and doing that enlist action. We're going to start seeing the Russians grabbing cards a bunch as well, I think, because they probably have the enlister as well, being surrounded by people who are interested in doing that, meaning themselves and the Nords. And there's some cards for the immediate bonus, it looks like. If you know you're going to do all the enlists, then drawing cards early just so you can kind of know that sort of unknown information is definitely not a bad choice. But obviously you should take the thing that you are most in need of at that moment. We see a Palladium bolster here. They are just kind of running their way up the track. Is that a bolster? Am I right? 9. What did I do? I did a move. Yeah. Yeah, that is indeed a bolster and enlist from the Polanians, who are have, I think, been buying their food primarily so they can take that enlist action. Yep. Having it upgraded does mean that trading for those resources is not quite as painful for them. And then we see a trade and a mech build for the Saxons here. A little bit awkward. Saxons kind of like tend to want to be a little bit more violent. I think that there's this perception that if you can get 3 combat stars, it's amazing. It's like really difficult to pull off. So there's this like desire to build mechs. Everybody wants to build some number of mechs for sure. And so certainly the ones that don't pay you for the mechs do feel a little bit worse as you are putting those guys into play. It looks like we're taking underpass here. So now that he's on essentially these metal locations, he has access to all the mines on the board. So a lot of mobility there, not as fast as speed, obviously, but a lot more touch points. Looks like I'm going to do the factory card here actually, and run on over to get an event and start doing these recruits so I can get those bonuses. Looks like I grabbed myself a mech recruit. So I know I'm going to be doing mechs. I know my neighbors are going to be doing mechs. I unfortunately did miss mechs on both the preceding turns for both red and black as my neighbors. So was a smidge too slow for that, but I guess I wasn't really planning on recruiting anyway. So that's making use of that factory card right there and getting those bonuses as I continue hoovering up all the different events in the game. I'm going to actually kind of spoil the rest of this round for you so I can start talking about some other stuff because we're on turn 9, just about the halfway point of this game. So we've got the Russians who are next. They're going to move. They're going to move into an encounter. And as part of this encounter, they're going to get the resources that they need to build, which is really, really nice. Anytime that they didn't have the capacity to build until they stumbled into the encounter, that was a way for them to get resources. So paying attention to if you get the appropriate resources on a card for the action that you're currently taking is a huge, huge, huge benefit. This also allows them to kind of abandon this food location, as I think they are probably pretty good on food. They don't have their enlist star yet. Yeah, it's a little bit interesting to me. I think that they're just trying to make sure that they finish their way out, but it is a bit surprising. I thought it was going to be like kind of enlist the whole way, but this ends up working out nicely for them. And then we're going to see trades around the table for the other 3 players. Pretty awkward on turn 9 of the game that people are using trades rather than just produce action and like getting the rewards. Like you're hoping at this stage, and everybody's got 5 or 8 workers or whatever. You're hoping at this stage that you're just using those resources rather than having to pay a coin for 2 resources to take the actions that are rewarding you or getting you the power that you need or allowing you to expand across the board, getting those territories or additional events or whatever. There's just a lot of stuff that you can be getting. So it is a state of the game that seems to be tough for people. At turn 9 here, we see that basically nobody has any stars. I don't think that this is irregular. Generally, you tend to, because you're ping-ponging back and forth between actions, the stars, they start coming really, really quickly, kind of out of nowhere. This is a game where you can't look at that and say, oh, I'm telling you right now, we're more than halfway through the game. It's turn 9. This will end on turn 17. And nobody has any stars right now. So we're about to see, a bunch of stars getting put out turn after turn after turn until the game is going to hit its end state. And we see a lot of metal buying out here as those mechs are really important. Let's talk about the state of the game a little bit. I do think that Polania is in really big trouble up in that corner there. They have been focusing on kind of like bolstering and doing a very economic thing. So they're probably going to get to that 16 for a star on the power thing there, which is a nice way for them to take actions up in the corner. So I think they've been like using trade quite a fair amount. How much is it for them? 1, 2, 3. This is their 4th trade action in the game. So they've been using trade to make up for the fact that their workers can't really do what they want to be doing, but they don't have to be paying the power for those workers because they're taking the trade action instead. So they're making use of the fact that they don't necessarily have the right resources. Saxony, I think, is doing okay here, but their game plan is just coming out a little bit slow. They're a little bit spread out. They're trying to build mechs, but mechs are on the trade action, which is not a great feeling for them at this stage of the game. So that doesn't seem too exciting either. Looks like my event, by the way, gave me a mech. I think I waffled on that one for a while. and ended up landing on that because I didn't like the other choices of the actions there. I think I'm doing quite well. I've managed to expand out. The card economy is very real at this point. I think that the Russians, having gotten that extra food early, are in a very, very good position. And the Nords are okay, but they were a step set back, which I think is going to make it very difficult for them to end up pulling anything together and winning through that. Looks like we get a whole series of produce actions. Round 10 is a produce, and then finally we're going to end up with a Saxon move at the end of this round. And we're going to see a couple enlists along the way as well. But we do see the very first star getting played by Rusviet as they do get their 8th workers. So this is a game where everybody's a little bit slower on the workers. We wait until turn 10. No one says I'm going to go straight for it at the beginning, which means that we're not going to see people completely choked on popularity. Speaking of popularity, by the way that the Polanians have been playing means that they are at that threshold of the second tier. So they are going to be able to get some better victory points, but they need to get stars or territories in order to make that extra popularity worthwhile for them. You see me, this is my note sheet. You see it on the screen there. As I'm furiously trying to keep up with the sequence of actions. I do think that a weird thing about Scythe is that it has this sort of very fast, very slow kind of pace to it that changes over the course of the game. And looks like that was the move for the Saxons. So we're on to my turn. And this to me is actually, I think, the most pivotal play that I make in the game. I see that Aaron, the red player, is up there with something like 6 metal or something ridiculous. Because he's done a couple produce actions with those workers that have been sitting there, but he hasn't had the time to make them mechs yet. And knowing that Rusviets can kind of just go same action over and over again, and he is sitting on the this map, so he's probably going to be like bolstering and making himself a threat. Whereas right now he's very easy to attack with only 4 power. And sort of an inability to combat back. So I take an aggressive move action, send that mech that I got for free up there. It does make sure that I am already at 0 popularity, so there's no better time to attack. I do know that I'm probably giving him a free star here. As you know, if I win this attack, he's going to get a star back. So we're kind of swapping stars. It's not likely that I'm going to keep this medal for very long, maybe even if at all, because I can't use it immediately and I can't really defend the position. Even sending my hero, I just don't have enough really to support everything up there. I do fortunately have scouts, so I get to steal a couple cards from Rusviet along the way, and those cards turn into resources. And of course, if I draw big numbers, that just is even more penalizing. So the attack here felt pretty good. I think that the fact that I was so extended into the board, and it's not a common Riverwalk situation that you see over into the tundra there, I think that was maybe just a bit of an unanticipated attack. And also, I got to then take the move action with my hero to get yet another event, and it puts me within 3 move of yet another event if I can swing across the factory and head back south homeward. So lots of options for me that open up from there. Looks like I somehow get a popularity after this. How does that happen? I take the build action after moving, and the build action because of my enlistment probably. Nope, I don't have an enlistment. Why does the build action give me popularity? I think I was at 0, right? And I went down. I'm a little bit confused by that. What do I build? Looks like I built a mill to help myself with my oil production problems. I am bemoaning the fact that I didn't make the 8 workers because the 5 is not quite doing everything that I need, but it's close because thank you cards for solving those problems. I'm going to figure out why I have that 1 popularity someday. Oh, I bet it was the event. I bet the event. Oh, yes, that's right. It was an event that gave me, I think, money and popularity. The other stuff was not too exciting, and I knew that I needed to dig myself out of the popularity hole. And fortunately, I had bounced the workers first. I didn't have to fight anybody, so I was able to resolve the event after the fact. Red Rustviets here don't want to see the situation where I use any of their metals, so they immediately turn to attack. They'll get a star for this, and I'm realizing that we're actually not trading stars because I didn't get a star on my attack. I just attacked some naked workers out there. So I'm essentially giving away a free star here to disrupt some Russian tempo, right? Take some cards away from them, which makes them a little bit more challenged on that side of things. The Russians don't necessarily have a bunch of cards. Maybe they didn't actually do the enlister. So I do remember them being a little bit troubled with cards. And also, I'm not taking genuine enlist actions anyway. So making it that it's a little bit difficult for them to attack maybe later in the game, although with the free star here, it's fine for them. However, it does disrupt them for a turn. And I don't know. I think it's a really interesting choice. It's a really interesting moment. I'm not sure that it's fully correct, but I do think throwing off the flow here does matter a lot. The Rustviets dump a bunch of guys up in that lumber camp there so they can take a whole bunch of... they can basically get a bunch of wood and then take move actions afterwards to do some engineering. Building. They'll win that fight having to pay down and paying a lot of cards. I will roll over. I did contemplate for a long time really paying highly, but they made essentially the most... Okay, sorry for the awkward interrupt on my side. I'm running out of space on my computer and need to get an external hard drive, so I needed to emergency delete some stuff as it just abruptly stopped recording. So lost my train of thought there, but looks like the Rustviets just finished their attack. We're going to see follow-up trade from the next three players. Two of them building a mech. The Planians, I think, kind of need a mech at this stage to get out of there. I think again that the mine plan might have been a little bit more dynamic for them, but the mechs for the movement is always good. So we see the players around the table cashing in on their metal to get a couple more mechs in play. Then we head into turn 12 in a moment here. Yeah, we're seeing, I think the Saxons are debating whether they're going to essentially go for 4 full mechs, which is pretty rough if you're doing the trade action. Taking the same action 4 times is not really the most ideal. On my side, I take a bolster action and an upgrade, discounting that metal there, which I desperately need because I'm unable to take the metal action really in any way, and get a handful of coins. Also trying for that ambition of getting up to this 16 power, although whether I'll get there or not, it's a little bit speculative at this point in the game. We see bolster mech from the Rustviets, who are probably just going to do that again until they kind of finish out. And a produce enlist from the Nords there as they continue farming their way forward to victory. We're going to see a move upgrade from the Polanians here, and they're going to use, I think, their lake mech to get out into some options here, have a little bit more spaces that they can take those workers going forward. But it's not, again, the most exciting move. There's not a lot of good spaces to be sending their guys. They have a lot of popularity, so they really can't afford to bounce those farmers. Yeah, just a little bit stymied there. They are going to continue to get that extra power. They're almost certainly going to get to 16 before the end of the game at the pace that they are going at. And we're going to see a move, I think, following that by the Saxons as well. Yeah, so the problem with Saxons here on turn 12 is they don't have enough progress towards the things that they want to be doing to get stars. And so I think they know that they're not going to be the ones ending the game. So they need to be making sure that they're getting points in some other ways. And having to awkwardly move your guys backwards does not help with claiming extra territory, as we're getting to that point of the game where leaving people or making it difficult for others to claim that territory around it. It's not a lot of space to claim anyway, but having to go backwards with that move action just to make it so that they can proceed to take the enlist action is not exactly the most efficient thing, and especially that enlist action is not so great on the engineering board anyway. My turn. Looks like I'm going to produce and make a mech here thanks to a card. My discounts from that upgrade. I get to use my very last metal here from trading, which does make me feel clever for how I used my resources. Hooray. I've got all 4 of those out now, so I get myself a mech star, it looks like. Hooray. And having done that without having a single metal production action, all through trade and cards. Hooray. We throw that mech sort of in the spot that is vulnerable from other people attacking it. I don't really think a lot of spaces are vulnerable. I didn't mention this one thing about the Saxons, but they move into the factory space to get that factory card, which is a little bit awkward for me as I was considering, like I said, sending my hero down to claim another event, but they do a nice job of blocking that up. And actually, I like the factory space for Saxony quite a lot. They don't have an amazing game plan, so having a factory cards help me out. Maybe I can get some points from that. Can make a really big difference for them. Like I said, I think there were a lot of mech cards in there, so that allows them to get there without having to do that really awkward trade action at this stage of the game. Anyway, looks like we had a move. Yep, that's a move from the Rustviets, who kind of expand outwards and claim another event. They drop their guys back off in the farm there so they can essentially finish their producing and listing kind of cycle along the way. Having now 8 people, they can more efficiently produce what they want to, where they want to. So one upside of having their guys bounced out of that metal area there was that they could kind of just move them into other spots. It did take them, an extra turn, I think, to do that. But ultimately, seeing that now, I am now a bit more skeptical about the value of the attack that I made earlier in the game there. Looks like there was a star for... I guess there was... that was some objective. I didn't quite see what it was. Yeah, I'm not sure what the objective was, honestly. I think this is also an objective. Yeah, this is for the Nords for having a gazillion metal, basically. So that was a produce action, right? Followed by an enlist. Wait. No, it was a trade action. Trade action. So that's, I think, why we see so many trades from the Nords there, is trying to get up to that huge amount of metal that they need. We see another trade from our beleaguered Polania. And then we see a factory card action from the Germans getting themselves that 3rd mech and also preventing their neighbors from getting coins from the enlisted spots there. It's a little bit awkward for them. It's also going to allow him to move. Unfortunately, his leader is surrounded. He could hop up with that leader and smack that mech if he wanted a victory star. Pretty easy to win against a 3-power Russian. He decides to do exactly that. He decides to do it with a mech instead of the leader, leave the leader on that middle spot there, which isn't so bad for me. Allows me to come in and attack a pretty vulnerable leader there, standing by himself, surrounded by a lot of yellow guys. But yeah, this is a nice, easy victory for the Germans, and actually they get to use their disarm power to take away even more power from the Russians, basically guaranteeing that they can't fight back in any way. And they're a little bit low on cards. They're a little bit low on power. So they're just kind of a little bit choked. I mean, they've great resources, but that is what they have. Everything else, they're kind of a little bit down on, actually at 0 popularity, I think, as a result of the event that they took. Some cards passed around. Battle. And we're going to move to the top of turn 14 here. We're getting pretty close to the end of the game. Doesn't look like we're close to the end of the game. And that's, I think, one of those things you need to be wary of. just seeing that people have, like, one player having 3 stars is enough to say this game is going to end pretty soon. It's very, very viable. Maybe it depends on how people are playing on your board. And we realize that we can still do our move 3 to get to that same event using our Outrider or Wayfarer or whatever it's called, and just flank on back home and go flying through the world. Yeah, not a river walk we often use. I think this ends up being another one of a kind of a dud event, just sort of like a little, I think, yeah, it's like get a couple coins or something like that. And then I get another enlister there. Or maybe the enlister was the 2 coins. Yeah, I don't even see what I got for that event, so probably just some bumps somewhere. I'm not sure. Maybe it was gone already. I can't quite entirely remember. And that's the glary part of the board. I apologize. All right, looks like we get a bolster mech from the Reds, which gets them their 4th mech. So they're on their way towards ending the game. We get a bolster mech from the Blues as well here, who would really like to make sure they have enough time to use all that metal before the end of the game, but they're going to probably struggle to do that. We got a bolster enlist over on Polania's side, putting them up to that 14 power, so they're very, very close to closing the gap there. And then finally, we're going to see a produce from the Germans here. The produce from the Germans is going to be a little bit awkward. It's going to put them at 7 workers, which means that they're going to definitely need to produce again, and can't take all of their guys away from that village in order to get that worker star. Their produce action allows them to upgrade, and they don't have any oil either. So yeah, it's just definitely Saxony is really jammed up. I think that one of the main lessons I took away from the modular boards is really making sure that you have access to the resources that you need resources. I think one of the things that I actually really respect about the struggling Polanian game plan is that they acknowledged they couldn't get the resources they wanted to. So instead of doing a produce thing, they did a trade thing. I still think that maybe doing the mine thing would have left some more opportunities, although where do the mines on the board go is really the question. A lot of villages. We noticed that a lot of mines go into villages, which is really not ideal. Not sure what the story behind that choice was, but yeah, it's definitely stymieing. Looks like I get a whole bunch of power from bolstering, and I think an enlisted guy in there, trying to get my way up to 16 as we see that the timing on this game is getting near a close. We're going to see a whole pile of move actions coming after this. We're at this stage where, again, we see 4 Russian stars. They could get a star from another combat. I take that back. It's really hard for them to get another star from combat because they are very, very low on power. But maybe if they jump a unsuspecting German at this stage, they could get them. Germans are looking very, very vulnerable at this point in time. And let's see. I mean, they could just jam the enlist action. That would certainly be an option for the Russians. They could. It's probably a little bit late for them to do the building thing. So yeah, I mean, they're basically looking at an enlist and a combat star to end out the game. They're just really not anywhere close on the other ones. So they probably need to take the opportunity to jump the Germans while they can. However, if they jump them on the mine, it's going to put them down to 1 power. So they probably need to get some more power if they are indeed going to try to do that. Or they can find this path that makes it so they don't have to, I didn't use the Wayfarer. I must have used a mine or something. Must be a mine on that space that I can't see, because that's probably how that guy got in there. Oh, no. He's using the Russian power, the homestead thing or whatever, right? Go from a village to the factory. He's attacking the factory directly. 2 guys, 2 cards. Also, he doesn't have to worry about losing the 2 power. So this is going to be the 5th star for the Rust-Viet player, who's going to need to find a way to limp across the finish line from here. I think it's probably with the produce action. I think they're at 3. How many are they at right now? 1, 2. Might have missed writing it there. Well, I might have missed writing it there. Either at 2 or 3 enlist folks in play. This is the challenge with writing stuff while you're playing the game. They're going to debate what they're spending for a while, but the end result is going to be that we have a bounced Saxon. This is the thing that's a little bit tricky in this game, right? If when the Germans had attacked the Russians, they just said, you know what, I think you're going to roll over and die. I'm not going to use any power. I'll just use some good combat cards to beat you. Then they would still have the power and the Rust-Viets would not be able to attack them back. So I think that idea of that like Yomi game of are you going to use your resources or not is a really, really big deal in this game. And very entertaining too. And also, I mean, you have to consider third players, right? Like now, we see that Saxony is the whipping boy here. So we get a bunch of the Nords moving into a village so they can get that worker star soon. But we also see the Nords taking the opportunity to jump out here and attack Saxony and just knock them all the way back to their home base. They basically concede the battle. And we see the Nords dropping down to a vulnerable amount of power. They are no longer essentially able to safely attack either yellow or white. The Saxons will take the Polanians will take, I keep saying that, the Polanians will take the opportunity to move on to that encounter they've been next to for a while, send their submerged mech somewhere else as kind of a threat down in Crimean land. And you see that movement of 1 is just not exciting here, right? That's the reason why speed is so powerful. That teleport power for the Polanians looks really nice and flexible, but moving on to a lake, moving to another lake, and then off the lake, it's just a lot of movement. It's not like you can leave your workers behind, so it doesn't help you get your territories. Remember that kind of like was one of the most exciting powers when I started playing this game, and I found that it's actually just quite disappointing. That's I think that's about it for them. We're going to see a factory card action from the Saxons coming up here, which is going to allow them to move elsewhere, but also put their last mech into play, which is going to give them that star that they're looking for. And looking at the board state, it was obvious that Rust-Viet would not be able to finish the game here because they have no popularity, so they can't actually take the produce action, allowing them to put, I think it is their last enlist from my notes here at this stage. They must have only 1 enlist back, but yeah, they can't put it into play. So everyone can look around and tell pretty definitively this game is going to be over in about 2 turns. After, it's going to be Red's next action, and then the action after that is when the game is most likely be over, short of somebody sending those red workers home, which actually would be an optional delaying tactic, and they are sitting on a mine there, so if somebody wanted to hop on that grenade, they absolutely could further prolong the game. I do think that is something that is overlooked maybe strategically by folks, that actually just bouncing workers is a viable option. I spend my 2 coins here and get my final enlistment. Probably a little bit too little too late. Grab a couple coins, and I do grab a star for that enlistment there. I use that factory card a lot this game. I don't know if just kind of like bouncing between bolster and something else would have been maybe like bolster produce would have just been better, just getting coins that way rather than spending coins. One of my objectives was have 20 coins in hand, so I do sort of not get the star objective to get the recruit objective here, and I'm like in spitting distance of the power now. So I do think in retrospect this was maybe a mistake, but the fact that I had multiple game plan options here just indicates how free the position that I was playing was in. The Rustviets take one of the saddest actions I've ever seen taken in this game. They spend a coin in order to get popularity so that they can produce on their next turn. We're not seeing it yet because I actually, looks like I'm finishing my move. I see. I got a move at the bottom. I'm expanding out to different territories using that wayfaring action, and I'm smacking some Rustviets back home, knowing that they're the ones that are kind of public enemy number one here, and making sure that they just have fewer territories along the way. They're also very, very soft here. The problem that I'm facing is that if I do decide to use any power, I can just lose. So I decide in this instance that I'm going to essentially gamble a little bit. Part of it is that I do think that I used a good card, and I just felt that I had the flexibility to do that, and I knew that he couldn't spend any more than 2 power on the defense because he needs the power so that he can ultimately end up producing a little bit later. All right, that was the Rustviet turn. You didn't even see, it was so fast. They just traded for that 1 popularity that I mentioned. We see a produce enlist by the Nords here, which I think is their final enlistment. And a star. So that's their 4th star for the Nords. They're playing a nice, efficient game there. A lot of resources. They just don't have any territory in play right now. But they do have a lot of stars. Polania here takes the trade action. I think they maybe don't have the resources that they needed for something else, but yeah, or maybe just missed that the game was about to end because taking a bolster action to get the star there might have been worth it for them. I think they were also maybe just kind of hoping to get it a little bit more incidentally otherwise anyway. Looks like they do end up building themselves a mech during this trade action here. And Saxony here is going to take their last action, which is going to be a produce action. The produce is going to let them get their worker star, I believe, but not much else beyond that. So kind of a little bit of a dud for them. And then on my next turn, I'd originally planned on doing the bolster action, but after some consideration, I decide that actually I should take a move and attack action instead because I can get a star from the bolster or I can get a star from the combat, and I can also spread out to some more territories. Further, I can spread out into the factory, which is worth 3 territories, and take them away from Rustviets. Now, you might think, hey, if I attack the Rustviets, there's absolutely no way they're going to end the game because they don't have the factory. But the reality is that the Rustviets have absolutely no gas left in their tank. They've done everything they want to do this game, right? They've built all their mechs. They're 1 enlistment away from finishing the game. And the only other thing they'd maybe consider doing is like building some stuff. But the longer this game goes, it's just worse for them. So they definitely want the game to end. They could maybe take the move action and sort of start spreading out again, but those extra turns, other people have essentially just constant access to moves, right? Like because both Saxony and I have factory card means that in theory we could move every single turn if we needed to. So it's just they're not going to be able to keep up with the mobility that we have. It's actually, I think, the primary advantage of the factory card is that you can just move. And that idea of having off turns of like not being able to move really matters. And you see me just kind of spreading some guys around. Guy that was bounced out, this guy over here, he's just going to claim another territory. At this point, we were holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then if we have the factory, 11 territories, which is huge amount of territories. The other thing with the move action is that we actually have enough lumber here to build a building, which is going to push us over from 6 to 7 popularity. It's kind of a magic number. So it's another reason that I realized move was just going to be better than bolster. And we're really not concerned about losing this fight because we can spend our resources at this stage. Even just 1 versus 2, he just has no gas in the tank, as we said. We see the entrance of the Cheez-Its. there we have it. Star there. Russviets are going to do their thing. And then let me walk you through how the endgame scoring goes here. So endgame scoring coins, I'm going to go around the table. So Crimea 14, Russviet 22, which makes sense because they really kind of focused on the main actions that scored them coins, which is a great way to play. The Nords also did exactly that with 21 coins, 12 coins for Polania, impressive considering the amount of trade actions they took, and Saxony only with 4 coins, given the amount of times that they took trade actions and were not able to take the actions that really were giving them coins. You really do need those in-game points. It makes a big difference, obviously. For stars, this is the multipliers are higher for white and yellow, but I'm not going to talk about the multipliers. I'm just going to give you the points for those categories. So for yellow, 16 points, red, 18, blue, 12, none for white, and then 9 for Saxony. So we really see that is where Polania's game plan struggled. Having that upgrade action just makes it so much harder because you need to take it 6 times in order to get those stars. And we see just a smidge away from getting that bolster star there, just some missed opportunities. Territories are really where I'm going to take over. 33 points for yellow, 6 red, 6 blue, 12 white, and 8. The space thing is a mess. I need to get on this. So we were talking about the number of territories for resources. It's 41303 going around the table. And then build bonus, I was the only one that actually got build bonus. I got 6 points for my build bonuses. I actually can't even quite see what the reward was. I know that it's 2 buildings doing what they're supposed to. It was like 3 for each of them, and they're just on specific spots or whatever, or near certain things. I don't really remember what it was this game. But no one else really was doing any building. Building, I find, is not very common in the meta of this table. And then, of course, folks paid their victory points that we bid at the beginning. I ended up winning pretty resoundingly with 73 points, 40 for Russviet, 39 for the Nords, and then 24 for the other 2 players here. I think breaking it down, it really comes down to the fact that I had all this territory, a lot of freedom of things to do. I got enough stars for it to be respectable. And while I was doing that, I got a handful of coins along the way. I don't think that I necessarily played it the most efficiently. I think that I did maybe get distracted by that factory card, but just being able to expand outwards and then go to 0 popularity, but use that bolster monument action as well as the building action with the enlist there, as well as the 2 popularity from the enlist. It's just enough to bump me up into that 7. I mean, that popularity alone was 11.5. It's 17 points for the popularity, and that makes a really, really big difference. Obviously, all the territory is the other key component about what the impressive victory was here. So that was the first game. I think everyone was shaking off the rust a little bit. We now remember how incredibly dangerous Crimea is. We remember how red is just very, very likely to end the game, and the other players are often trying to find ways to either economically or aggressively curtail additional points along the way. So that's game 1. Thanks for watching. Game 2 coming at you. All right, I'm not sure. I think this camera angle doesn't catch quite as many things, and so probably it's not preferable for that reason. But do let me know in the comments what you think about it, if I should actually toy with this, like if it's worthwhile. But this is game 2, and in game 2, we have a very heavy bidding war that takes place over the Russviet and Crimean factions. So Russviet is industrial, which is an absolutely dirty combination that is actually banned in the base game because it's just too damn good. The ability for Russia to just kind of like constantly produce, bolster after making all their workers just makes it so that they can use all of their resources. The only question on the way that this map is laid out, you can't quite see which tiles are where, but maybe if you're familiar with the fact that the snowy tiles are the oil tiles, they do have to cross some water to get to that oil over there. But their starting position is on a village and metal. So we all knew that this was going to be really good. We're just not quite sure how good it is. It goes for a bid of 14 to the same player that played red in the first game as well. The player who played blue in the first game paid 15 to play Crimea, probably a little bit biased on the fact that I just won off of it, but also it's a very good Crimean setup with agriculture, which is a pretty favorable board for Crimea. And I don't remember exactly what those starting things are, so we're going to see when tiles go on the board what resources they're getting, but I do think that they're pretty close. Actually, it's the same as what I had last time. So it's a village and food, which is exactly what you want for patriotic. The other three are all going to go for bids of 0. We all didn't seem to be too opinionated. I was pretty happy to land on mechanical Polania here. This was actually the absolute last pick. I was the one that dropped out of the racing for 14 and 15 bid competitions. The problem with Polania here is that you're super jammed up in the corner, just very limited in terms of the mobility and the way that this setup is, just kind of that like weird hook thing right there. So it's definitely going to be a slower start. I'm not planning on being the first to finish this game, but my hope is that with the 14, 15 point deficit to the leaders, I actually can score enough points to get there. My opponents in 4th and 5th seat, who played this also 4th and 5th seat last time, are thinking the same thing. So we've got some Nords that are going to be building buildings and upgrading, and we've got some Saxons that are now much better at building their beloved mechs. They also are pretty good at producing along the way. So that's what we're looking at for this game. Let's go ahead and roll tape. We've already seen Rusviet take their action. They are producing to make those workers and that metal there. I believe we also have Crimea doing the same thing, a worker and a food for them. I'm going to end up moving on my first turn. God, I wish I had put that. I think I'm drinking a Sam Adams cherry wheat beer there. Wish I put that out of the way. Good thing to note for the future. But I'm going to end up moving my guys so that I can get one of my little duders there onto the village. And also I'm pretty not interested in the oil location there, given that I have the mechanical. I'm always really hoping that these encounter cards, there we go. Encounter cards are very, very impactful for my plan. I like doing them right at the beginning to kind of make my game plan around it. I don't think that this worked out for exactly what I wanted, but let's see what I grab here. Ideally, I would have been able to get a mech here at the beginning. That would have been the dream. Looks like I end up getting some oil so I can upgrade, right? I essentially figure I'm going to end up doing a little bit of trading and I'll upgrade for something so I can give myself a little bit better actions and discounts. It's not the dream, but it is what it is. I do know that I'm going to be trading because I need trading metal for resources. Looks like we get a move also from the Nords here, just kind of expanding outward with their guys. And they move off a village, which is a pretty bold choice. They're going to be playing for a low cost strategy, it seems like, and pretty aggressively move into my territory there, claiming the oil that I said I wasn't so interested in, which does put me in a little bit of a funny position. We got the Saxons over there. They are taking the trade action. I don't know exactly. I couldn't see what resource they put into play, but we'll be able to tell, I guess, a little bit later. And then we're going to see after they choose I guess we're still on the encounter for the Nords. We're going to see the Saxons do some trade in just a second. Here we see it. Maybe we'll get to see those resources. That looks like oil to me. We're looking for an upgrade. Really quick produce here from the Rusviets, who are just going to go straight to those 8 workers as fast as possible. We can't see the same thing from Crimea. They're going to have to do a little bit of bouncing around. So Crimea is going to take the trade action, get themselves some metal resources, essentially the same sort of pattern that we had in the first game, given that Crimea is actually randomly in the same seat as before. Great. Looks like my action this round is trade. In fact, we're going to see a trade both from the Polanians and from the Nords. Thanks to the oil I got from that encounter, I am going to be able to upgrade here, which normally I wouldn't be doing very much on the engineering map. So give myself a little bit more efficient actions, some discounts elsewhere, which will certainly help out in the long run. So can't complain too much about the results of that encounter. And then we're going to see a move from the Saxons over on that side after we finish our trade sequences here. The playing with bidding, I think, is really interesting because there's sort of this acknowledgement that, oh, okay, we've got like a couple kind of busted, they're going to be like the faster setups, almost always, being the first person to end the game with a 6-star is going to make you very, very favored to win. Doesn't necessarily mean you'll win, just makes you favored to win. Getting to control that tempo, that timing really makes a difference. And also it's just the more points, obviously, for the stars. And so there's sort of an acknowledgement when you're bidding 0 into these very good setups that you are not going to be the person closing out the game. And so you might want to be making decisions. I tend to think like really big picture. I want to do all this stuff. And actually the big challenge when you're playing in those positions is you want to be more narrow in your focus. Make sure you're getting as many points as possible and hope that you are close enough that you can close the gap to the leader. So you don't necessarily need to arc towards getting 6 stars. You're maybe hoping to arc towards getting like 4 stars or something like that. We're going to see a third production here from Rusviet, who's going to push out a mech as well. Turn 3 mech, turn 3 star from all those workers. Really, really rapid start. Just exemplifying how incredibly powerful this nutty combo is starting on a village space. Yeah, it's just a really, really good faction. Crimea is going to do the produce thing themselves, getting up to 5 workers. We're also going to see a produce from myself and Polania here so that we can get ourselves workers. We start getting on that village train as well. We're going to see a move out from... Nope, actually, I think that's a change. We're going to see a change of mind. It's going to end up being a produce here instead. Is that right? No, it is a move. We're going to see a move here from the Nords, who are going to move the mech that they traded for last round. Is that right? Something like that. Maybe they evented it into play, and I just missed that they evented it into play. That actually makes a whole lot more sense. Spreading out a little bit. Seems like they're not entirely sure where they want their workers to be at the beginning. And I think this is the struggle that the Nords player saw throughout the course of this game, is that they kind of were moving around, I think a little bit indecisive from the beginning what they wanted their game plan to be. So just realizing what you want your like sort of production loop to be, I think is like matters a lot. We see that getting piles of workers tends to be just very, very strong. It's just hard to keep up with the economy of that. We're going to see a production over in Saxony in a minute when this encounter finishes. Could also be that the Nords player kind of really had said, okay, let me make the encounters sort of determine what's the biggest deal in this game here, and they maybe didn't do quite enough for what they wanted to do. All right, looks like we got a turn 4 move from the Russians, who are just going to pile all into metal here and basically end up from here going to produce max, and have all the metal they need with no concerns that anyone's going to come and attack them. They also happen to get an event while doing it, so that's a nice little Benny that comes along as well. We're going to see the Crimeans in a moment here trade, and I think probably put out a mech. Do they put out mechs with Patriots? Yeah. Or agriculture, I mean. So they're going to be putting out a mech in a moment here, and probably the speed mech, and sort of set up in a similar way that I did in the previous game, I suspect. This event here is a huge deal, I think, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it's they get to do a recruit, which is really not part of their plan, but allows them to get all the incidental bonuses. I don't remember which one they took. I want to say it's a mech because they knew they're just going to fire for a bunch of coins. So, I mean, essentially, if they know that their Saxon neighbors, yellow is about to build a mech. So I think that it's a total of like 6, 7, 8 points over the course of the game that recruit is going to give them, not to mention the one-time bonus of I think it was 2 popularity that they took, which allows them to avoid the problems of, am I going to be, have 8 workers and be unable to continue to produce? So a really incredible encounter for Rusviet there that lets the engine keep on rolling. We have a bolster mech over on my Polanian side here. This is more to get the mech out and make sure we use those resources than anything else. And we're going to get a produce from the Nords, followed by a trade from the Saxons as we continue to set up more resources along the way. Entering turn 5 in just a moment here. I mean, it is pretty clear, I think, that the players with the more workers in play have that accelerated start, and that's expected, right? They started with the workers on those village spaces. They have the biggest opportunities to take advantage of them. I think that when you start on the village space, you are meant to use it. I do think that the Nords choosing to swim across the river, it saves you the resources, but for like not having to produce expensively, but by the resources, I mean like power and popularity and maybe even a coin. But the number of onboard resources, your food and stuff like that you get for the extra workers is just well worth it for the action efficiency of the process that you're going through. All right, turn 5, we see a produce and a mech from Rusviet. We're also going to see a produce from Crimea, which I think is going to make them get their star. For maxing out on workers. So we see both these big factions going for go big, go fast as their kind of primary focus here. Over on my side, we're going to see a produce enlist. We might even have an angle that we can see what I choose to enlist if we're lucky. Pulling that arm. And I only managed to, I think, enlist here because I upgraded to make the food. When I did my upgrade, I made it so that the food here was discounted. So it gets me out there just a smidge faster and gets me up to my 5 workers as well. I mentioned last game, this is where I struggle, whether I should be going to 8 or anything like that. I think in retrospect, I probably should have here, but I end up doing other things. I end up deciding here to take the enlister based on what I think my neighbors are going to do. This ends up being a huge mistake. I should have acknowledged that I wasn't going to be doing all the enlistments, and I should have just taken the more powerful one, either the popularity, knowing that it was going to the popularity for building, or the mech one, just knowing that those were going to kind of happen a decent amount. Both of my neighbors had like 0 mechs, I think, right? Like it's 0 coins on mech, 0 coins on mech. Yeah, so I did not think that mechs were likely, but I probably should have gone for the builder popularity thing rather than the cards that I didn't really need as this faction anyway. So that was a mistake. See a move from the Nords as they continue to swing north, just kind of exploring territory up there. I'm not exactly sure what they're headed for, but that's because I can't exactly see what the territories are that they're moving into. We see a production and an enlist from the Saxons, which is quite possibly the mech enlist, just making sure they get a few things from their red neighbors. Speaking of the red neighbors, going into turn 6, they move and spread out from there to both an event and onto that oil space that we were talking about would be so important for them. And again, the encounter here is going to end up paying dividends as they're going to find some wood in this encounter, which will allow them to build. I believe they're going to end up building the monument, which is going to make it so that their popularity issues for producing are completely null and void for the rest of the game. The only thing they need to be concerned about is having enough power to produce. The Russians are super vulnerable right now because they have almost no power. However, there's no one that really has any way of getting to them. The river walk is not really appropriate for the Saxons over there. And in retrospect, it was my job to attack red. The reason is you can't quite see, but there is a mine there, and I'm actually on a mine. So I needed to take this opportunity to knock them back. But losing the popularity for me felt like would be pretty bad. So I don't know. They definitely needed to be disrupted, but I needed to make sure that I was getting something out of it too. So I needed to find a more opportune time to strike, which I do not. Try to figure out what my actual game plan is here. All right, we have a bolster enlist from the Crimeans here and trying to get themselves their card engine going, essentially. We have a trade over on my side. I think I'm getting the metal so that I can build another mech because I just feel like I am limited in my movement choices and I want to be able to get across that lake there with my hero. I probably tunnel visioned a little bit much on doing that, but I probably maybe should have been producing instead. No, I produced the previous round. So yeah, it was either resources or move, which I wasn't going to do. Bolster didn't feel good. Yeah, I guess I see why I did trade. Looks like we have a produce upgrade for the Nords over there, followed by a trade as the Saxons are going on a full economy, produce trade cycle. The Russians are just doing the full production system as they go for production mech. Again, they are now at 0 power, so they're going to have to follow this up with some bolstering, which makes sense. It's the one thing that's getting in their way right now. Yeah, the power is the one thing that's getting in their way. It makes them very vulnerable, but it also means that they can't actually do their production spam. So this is the part of the game where if the Russians were going to get stopped, this would have been the easiest place to do it. The Crimeans happily take their move action and move out into the lumber yard up there, taking an encounter and spreading out their many workers. They decide to leave one worker behind in the village, which means that guy basically isn't going to be producing anything, but they're acknowledging that, hey, if I leave this here, it's going to be an extra territory later that I don't need to bother moving into. So they're valuing kind of that like really long-term points essentially over the additional production now. I think you can get away with that more with Crimea than any other faction because of their flexibility with the card payment. If you have 8 workers, like you probably have way more resources than you even really need as Crimea. We've got me doing a bolster and a mech. That allows me to go across the lake with submerging stuff here. We got a trade and a mech from the Nords up north. And then we have a produce and enlist from the Saxons to round out the round here as they continue to do their pattern here. So, you're noticing most people kind of do this like something produce, right? Like it's the beginning of the game. That's kind of primarily what you're trying to do is set up those production things, bolstering at this stage. You don't have the way of going and using that power that you get, so it doesn't feel so good. Moving, hopefully you're not doing as many movements because the only rewards you get for movements are those encounters. I think actually, I wonder if encounters were added because moving just felt so bad in terms of like comparison to the other places. And now it's like, oh, there's the opportunity for it to feel pretty good and you're racing to those spots. Or if it was more designed in such a way that it was like, no, I want encounters in this game, so we're going to make that a reality. My cats are running around, causing trouble. All right. I think we're just finishing that produce enlist over on the Saxon side. And we're going to see that the Russians are stuck on their bolstering action. But the thing is that their bolstering action gives them power and allows them to use the oil that they have. So they're perfectly happy to do this because they are playing industrial and they're getting tons and tons of coins for now, just feeling this pattern of essentially producing, bolstering. And at some point, they're going to have enough power to not be concerned about the fact that other people can come and smack them. Crimea is going to pattern back onto producing, which is going to give them a pile of wood. This is really, really nice for the agriculture thing because they're going to produce and build immediately. And they're going to be able to essentially do this like produce, bolster cycle as well, as they have a ton of workers to make all the resources they need to make that a reality without needing any upgrades whatsoever. Yeah, pretty nice setup for them over there. We're going to have a bunch of moves to round out the turn here, which means we're probably going to have some encounters that are going to slow things out. I'm going to head out. I need to get myself into a place where I can start getting the resources I need. I've already got 2 mechs in play, so I decide that I want to actually go and get myself some lumber. So that's kind of the plan, is I'm going to sort of switch between producing and moving as I expand out into the middle of the board here. I do think that this was about the time that I should have paid attention to the fact that I could have attacked red relatively easily. I am low on the movements that I can, or the movements that I like. I have things that I want to do, but I did have that extra mech there just running around doing not much. Or this mech on the bottom left side here that I think could have gone in and started mixing it up a little bit with the reds. I don't know that it makes sense to have tried to attack like the big stack, but I think I should have. I think I really should have. And we saw in the first game, right? Like disrupting the reds, I think was a little bit ambiguous. So I was probably a little bit tentative about doing that here. Looks like my event gave me a windmill. A little bit awkward because I kind of want to build the buildings myself, but I also know that I'm behind on tempo and I want to get all 4 out so I can get the star. Didn't quite catch what the Nords were doing with their move, but spreading out a bit more comfortably up there, it seems. They have a lot of territory and not enough units to kind of claim the territory. I think that's something about also having done more village actions at the beginning of the game that would have made a difference. I now remember what I did with my mech there. I got a star for completing the objective of bouncing somebody after you have 7 power. So I paid the popularity to do that. And I probably should have just gone for the fight against red, paid the popularity because it's 1 extra popularity because I hit 0 after that, and taken the star, bounced their people. So that, now that I'm seeing that, that's definitely an oversight. Really interesting. Really interesting, yeah. Yeah, coming through the tunnel over by where they are, you actually can see. You can't see, but that little hole right there would have been the perfect spot for me. These modular boards, they require you to pay really close attention to where those tunnels are. If you're looking to sneak attack someone on a modular board, I think building a tunnel is even better on this than in the original game. I think tunnels were not especially good. But here the tunnels, the mines end up in like really funny spots, which I think makes a big difference. All right, we're going to move from the Saxons here, who are getting out into oil territory, it looks. It's a bit of a curious choice. They don't really want to be upgrading a ton. I mean, they're not awful at it, but they're not dreamy at it either. And then we are entering, it looks like turn 9. We're going to get a production and a mech from the Reds here, which I think is going to put them fully into max mechs and probably another star for them there. That's going to be followed up by a bolster and an enlist over on the Crimean side. Then we're going to see production from the last 3 players. By the way, I'm drinking iced tea, not the most gigantic cup of bourbon you've ever seen. And we've got stacks and stacks of red guys, which would look really intimidating. He's also got the People's Army, except for he does not have the yellow cards really to back it up. So he could play up to 4 cards, but I think he only has the 2. It doesn't really have a system for getting other cards. So this super economic focus here is paying off because everybody else is also just very narrowly focused on what it is that they're doing. So only, I think, successful in a game where no one is looking for that advantage to come in and be like, oh, you've got a ton of oil here. I can bounce these guys, pay a gazillion popularity, and take all of this oil from you. Yes, please. Bolstering from yellow makes us wonder if we're going to see yellow get all the way up to 16 this game. A little tough to do without sort of like a production with like the upgrade enlist guy in play, nor an upgraded bolster, I believe. So very fast, but not necessarily like efficient in terms of what he's getting out of those actions. Production here for Polania is just going to allow us to take a build action next time. Some resources over for the Nords and finally getting some extra workers. And then I think we're going to get some oil and I can't really quite tell what else behind that red wall for Saxony over there. Yeah, I think your table meta in Scythe does make a big difference. The reason that I think the economic approach tends to be stronger is that, particularly in the base game, the way that the board is structured makes certain positions nearly unassailable, or like maybe only one person can realistically attack you. And they have to have the setup to do it. You know, the mechs to probably with the speed so they can get to where they need to go. Definitely with the river walk that gets where they need to go. You just hide on your island. It's pretty hard for people to stop you from doing that. So, you know, the way that the hiding on islands is bad is because when the game ends, if you don't have very many territories, you're in a little bit of trouble. But if you are the person who's ending the game because you're an economic powerhouse and you end the game with a move action and you can kind of just run through and sort of like litter the world with workers. I mean, you can just add so many territories in the course of 1 to 2 moves. It makes such a big difference. Looks like we get a bolster here, which I think puts us on turn 10. Yeah, we're on turn 10 here. So it's a bolster as the Russians start making their tenuous position less and less tenuous as time goes by. We're going to see a production and a build from Crimea as they're going to bounce between their production and their enlisting thing, as we mentioned before. I guess the other downside of being stuck on your island is that you don't get like the appropriate building bonuses usually for putting buildings like right at if you're doing a bunch of buildings. You tend to miss out a little bit on those bonuses there. Move from me. I'm going to just kind of get the bear up into the mix. Pretty awkward. Definitely underestimated how clumsy it is to move along this sort of like chained path. I can walk straight into the center, but first of all, I'm the faction that needs that least. And then I take my mech to just kind of spread out, claim some territories in other places. I figure I can always backfill my territory, but by kind of spreading out aggressively, I'm hoping to expand the number of places that I'll own later in the game. It can be a bit of a gambit if you're like leaving yourself open, but nobody is really set up to fight. Power structure of people in this game is super duper weak, and I'm pretty sure that if yellow is going to attack anybody, it's least likely to be me, who's the other person that can make them really fight for it. Also, if they don't have a 5 and they fear that I have a 5, which I think I actually did because I was drawing a gazillion cards because I was foolish, means that it is actively foolish for them to attack me. Looks like I did get another event here with the bear at least. It's probably why I was moving towards the middle there. So at least there's some niceness with that. Looks like I mostly get some resources. Oh, I also got a building maybe? No, I built that building. All right, so we're going to see then a trade from the Nords, who are just financially flummoxed at this point. And I think I've, at this point, kind of gone belly up. Just the game plan is just too slow for what's going on. So they're going to see what they can get out before the game ends. And we're going to finally see a move and upgrade from the Saxons. The upgrade makes sense because they just got that oil. I'll be curious to see where they move here. They get an event with that move, and then I think they moved up north, maybe, excuse me, onto another metal territory, so they can finish building out their mechs. That's my guess. So that's going to wrap up turn 10. We see red has 2 stars right now. And like we said last time, when we had 3 stars, we're getting really close. And we know that red is very close to claiming more of their stars pretty soon. And also just tons and tons of coins, right? It also does depend on kind of what objective cards they have in hand. And if they're able to essentially claim any combats. Do people leave themselves open? Which I certainly have by having a mech on a mine up top. Lots of debate about this encounter right here. I like the modular bards. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I think that they really add a lot of dynamicism to the game and just a different play pattern than you're maybe used to seeing. Factions that are maybe not good can be really good. I played a game of this where I got to the factory on like turn 4 or something ridiculous like that, which was a lot of fun. And then I made a game plan around that. I don't even know that it was good, but it was really fun. I guess I won, so it is good pretty much by definition. But that's, not, that rush to the factory is not common in this group of folks that I find myself playing with quite a lot. And see a bolster and an upgrade here, some coins for the Russians. They dig into their oil reserves. But, I like the way that feels. I think the downside is that the factions that are already very good, yellow and red, if they have a good setup, are even better. And they're already so close to being very good in the base game that there's not that much extra, but I think even the best setups for white, blue, and black are equivalent to good setups for yellow and red. There are certainly bad setups for yellow and red that are overcome by good setups for the other factions. But if the other factions, white, blue, and black, have like a kind of mediocre starting setup, it doesn't I think hold up there. Crimea, we're going to see with a bolster and enlist, I believe here. I'm going to do a produce and enlist on my turn as I'm very, very slowly enlisting because I've got that one guy building food in the back. Something a little bit, another thing about that crab claw starting spot that is stymieing me. We're going to see a move from blue, from the Nords, and then we're going to see a bolster So a lot of bolstering this round, and can't even read my own writing. A bolster and a mech from the Germans. Yeah, so we just briefly tell you while we're finishing out this round 11 here, we end up playing 2 more 4-player games after this, where both of them, no one bid on the white player, Polania, which is a fun faction to play. Just the setups for it always seem to be jammed into a corner, just kind of like really awkwardly. And we actually had Rusviet Industry again in the next game, and seeing the power of it this game, we bid it up like crazy. 22 for Rusviet Industry was the bid. And that game, Rusviet Industry, ended up actually coming in 3rd place. That was a really cool game. There's a 22 bid for Rusviet, 10 bid for Crimea, 5 bid for the Nords, 0 bid for the Saxons. And the Nords end up winning relatively comfortably with a very close game between Saxon and Rusviet next. The Nords just had they had the Patriotic, which is this one. Yeah. They had Patriotic, and they just they developed their little engine. They did their enlisting and then their bolstering, and they just got lots of coins and did things in a corner and didn't bother anybody, but they didn't end the game either. Russia did, but that 22-point deficit, was certainly enough to make the difference. With the 22 extra points, yes, Russia would have won, but only just barely. So I think it is important to recognize when even the weaker factions are able to play a really good game. It's, I think, easy to get tunnel vision, and Blue has the worst starting power, but the way that the game is set up still requires you to pay attention to what it is that people are doing. The last game of the night that we played was, Rusviet Engineering, which is a pretty bad combination. Engineering, and also resources that just did not match up well. In fact, I can't express how clumsy this position was but it was the same kind of corner that I'm in right now. So very, very similar, followed by Crimea Agriculture, which is the same sort of thing. That's a really good combo, but the resources were super bad on the board for it, and there was no way for Crimea to ever get out of essentially where it started. Then Nordic Mech, which seemed like a totally mediocre position, and then Saxony Patriots, which was the strongest and the one that people bid for, but it still was 4th seat, still was Saxony, which largely doesn't have that much of a power unless you have 2 good objective cards in your hand. I think the odds that you're going to win 3 fights are just very, very low. It's hard to win fights, and then when you win fights, you spend power, making it even harder to win fights. So unless your table plays in a really kind of, I'm going to say loose, and I don't mean that offensively. I just mean that people can choose to play a game in a style where they're going to, aggressively go into the end and sort of spin to win, right? Maybe they have the chance to get far ahead, but that game actually so it was a bunch of bad setups and one good setup with a high bid for it. And it was very, very close between Russia and Crimea, even though they had bad setups, because they still bid 0 and 1 for those seats. So there's something to be said about the power of those bad factions or the bad setups. The good factions are still going to be good, which is what I'm trying to get at with this very extended ramble. Okay, I see Saxon doing some stuff. I think that looks like is it a move over there? No, because I have them as bolstering. It looks like I'm doing a move. Okay, so we're in turn 12. We had a bolster upgrade from Russia that's just kind of continuing on the thing that they're doing, just constantly getting coins and upgrading there. We have a produce and build from Yellow here, from Crimea, as they continue to get to they may have even gotten a star. Yeah, that might have been their 4th build. Can I see 1, 2, 3? fourth one somewhere? I don't see one on their board. Oh no, there's the windmill there. They have 3. Okay, so they do need one more build to finish the thing. I do my move so I can do some building. We go further into the board. We claim the factory, hopefully for the 3 territories of it, hoping to kind of keep this. Doesn't seem to be like anyone really is in good position to attack the factory, so we're kind of hoping to just claim it early, take those 3 territories, and have that be that on our side. Also expanding so that we can build our buildings in more efficient spots, hopefully. We're going to be following this move build action with a produce for the Nords and then a trade for the Saxons. If you're doing a trade at this stage of the game, hopefully it's because you have something very, very important that you need to do and no way really to get those resources. But at this stage of the game, especially if you have 5 workers or 8 workers, it's really hopeful that you're not using the trade action. It's just, it costs a whole action, right? And it makes resources at a much lower rate than your guys do, and it costs you gold to do it. And the bottom action for it doesn't give you any gold back, even if it's a bottom action that you want to take. So I do generally think that trying to make sure you finish with your trade action in the early half of the game is very important. I think it is possible. I might have missed it. Possible. Russia's about to claim an objective if they haven't already. Doesn't look like it's on the board, so maybe not. Let's look over our popularity, by the way. So the Russians, thanks to their bolstering popularity thing, are actually going to push up. They're pushing up towards that second tier, very likely to get it. Crimea already in the second tier. So looking pretty good for them. And then there's a chance that Polania also will get there. But it looks like our friends blue and black just don't have a system for making popularity. And at this stage, are probably going to acknowledge that they are sitting in the first tier, which is more okay for them because they don't have that many stars out anyway. So that multiplier is not as painful to not have. Looks like we got bolster and bolster upgrade followed by bolster and list as the 2 powerhouse factions continue to race. I think that looks like a last and list for the yellow faction here. So they're going to go ahead and claim a star for that, as well as some little bennies. And after this, we have me coming in with trade. Am I doing a trade? No. I'm doing a production. I've just written my notes poorly. I'm doing a production. And I believe I actually managed to enlist here as well. And that's my 3rd enlistment, it looks like. I must have done an event that gives me an enlistment. Maybe not. Or maybe I got some extra food along the way that I missed. Because I have been hitting that production button. But might not be enough time for us to get our 4th enlist, unfortunately. And yeah, as I mentioned, we really missequenced. I think I cost myself like 4 or 5 coins by choosing the cards one first. If I had just chosen the hearts and then the coins, or the coins and then the hearts, I'd be in a lot better position. But c'est la vie. I don't think I quite expected the Nords to build all their mechs, but they kind of got into this position where they had 2 mechs and then said, well, if I want a star, I'm going to go to 4 mechs. So that's actually what they did on their turn, was trade and bought their last mech. Not a place that you really want to be playing a board that does not reward you for playing mechs. And we're going to have the Germans do a bolster action at the end here, and I have poor notes, so they're also going to build a mech. Looks like it's not going to be their last mech, though, so they've got a little ways to go. They're going to run out of time. They don't get to be Patriots for quite long enough. We're going to see a bolster action here for red, putting them completely out of range there, almost at the very top. And there they go to the absolute top. That's a star for the bolster. Just being able to constantly do it and having the upgrade, obviously, for it means that it's going to be 3 power each time. And it adds up very, very quickly. People that used to have no power whatsoever find their way shooting to the top. Extra coins every single time they did this. And also an upgrade star. So that puts them at 4 stars. 1, 2, 3, 4 stars. Yep. Maybe I'm wrong about the objective. I'm probably crossing my hairs about which game is which game. We're on turn 14 here, and I think there's a pretty strong feeling that the game is going to end on the very next turn, on turn 15, the beginning of turn 15, a blisteringly fast game. So everyone's thinking I have probably 1 more action, maybe 2 more actions, but Russia is closing in. Maybe a way that we can stop this is to not be vulnerable, but at this stage, we're probably all a bit too spread out from the choices that we've made earlier in the game. It's going to make it a little bit hard for us to control who goes where, when. Now, knowing this, I think that changes what Yellow Crimea's choices were here, because I think originally their plan was probably to produce, which allowed them to do their very last build action. However, if you know the game is going to end, moving to claim more territory is often a lot more efficient and effective than taking whatever star action you're going to take, because getting 1 star versus claiming 2 territories is generally worth more than 1 star, or always worth more than 1 star, I guess. And so the question is like whether you're going to hold on to them. But then the question is, people can only attack you so much. So if they kind of see you as the main threat, or you're set up in a position where you're easy to be attacked, then moving is almost free. So the real challenge is, can you move into spots where you didn't go from a defensive position to now a completely strung out and easy to attack position? And are multiple people going to take advantage or try to attack you along the way there? You might not be worried about certain players. So being able to have a sense of what the movement ranges are of the other players in the game is very, very important. And we do see most of Yellow's guys on the natural island there. There's not a mine that goes into their starting island, so they probably don't have too much to worry about. They do know that red is their primary concern, so attacking in such a way that leaves red in a bind is important. And then one thing that does end up getting overlooked here, but I do want to point out, is red is at 7 popularity. So if you're making attacks and you bring workers with you, red can't effectively counterattack without losing popularity, costing them a lot of points. So making sure that your attacks that leave yourself vulnerable meaning like only 1 plastic piece, so they can just pretty easily attack with 1 plastic piece or even 2 plastic pieces and crush you, more or less, like with absolute confidence. It's safer for you to bring along those workers because you're penalizing them from dropping a tier, and that's the real threat rather than anything else. So when you want to bring workers with you and when you don't is a really important decision in the game. And, you know, if for instance, like you were trying to bring this and move into a position where we're looking at like blue or black, who are at like 2 popularity right now, they might just not care. Like they might just acknowledge that it doesn't matter to them at all. So knowing who might or might not care about that popularity difference is a big difference. Excuse me. On my turn, I'm seeing, and I'm at 6 popularity. I'm really disappointed to see that Chris is not building here, or that Crimea is not building here, because I wanted him to push me up into 7 popularity. So I now need to make sure that I find a way to do this for myself. And so yellow finds 2 easy targets, a blue mech that is sitting by itself up north, and the red hero that is sitting by itself over on the side. Brings along some metal with him, I think, because that northern position is like essentially unassailable. Blue did just take a... nope, blue did not take a trade action, but blue has very, very low power, so probably not too concerned about them. But they should have flipped which ones they took, right? The mech went where the hero went, brought a worker with them, and then the hero went where the mech went. That could have been the way to go through that process. I think probably they were thinking more about what they would do with their resources, but I think at this stage they could probably have left their resources back home, and that would be entirely reasonable. It's going to be 2 quick wins for yellow here, which is going to be 2 stars. Pretty nice get for them. Bump, bump. We're going to follow this up with a bolster mech on my turn. The bolster is going to give me the star that I need. I'm not going to, I think that's not my 4th mech, I don't believe. 1, 2, I don't think so. Yeah, it won't be my 4th mech. So bolster for essentially the star and the couple coins that I get from the mech. And then we're going to see some moves coming in from all the remaining players as they essentially go on a mad dash for territories before the game comes to its natural conclusion. In terms of bidding, I've already kind of alluded to some of my main learnings, but definitely assessing the resource availability of your starting location matters a lot. Unlike base game, you really have to think about your mobility. What moves do you have to do to get where? If you have your hero go to a place and get an encounter, are they now stuck in a corner? If you play a lot of the base game, that like encounter that Saxony can get by crossing over into the woods is a great example of what I'm talking about here. It's a nice thing to get, not hard to get. No one else is really going to get it, but you're now kind of stuck out of the way. It's a real pain to get anywhere you want to go. So that's something to consider while you're assessing your starting places here. Factions that are good are really good. I think that they'll remain really good, even in bad starting positions. Just be aware that they're still probably worthwhile. Obviously, factions that are bad are more than viable if they have a good setup. So good setups often mean having a village as one of your starting locations and then having a paired appropriate resource for what it is, whatever it is that you want to be doing that game. Is generally what you're looking for a good setup. But also, are there a couple territories next to you? This 8 home base map is pretty tight. There are some spots where you really feel a lot more sandwiched in than you do on the normal Scythe base map. So that's another thing I think that is really worth considering as you expand outwards. Speaking of expanding outwards, it's exactly what we see the Nords do, trying to claim as many territories as they possibly can. And I was talking about setup stuff. So considering like having few neighbors versus having many neighbors, having few neighbors is, I think, almost always preferable. Just not having anybody be able to disrupt your game plan is really good. Spreading out to territories is really nice. Yes, you don't have the opportunity to attack others, but I think you can execute successful game plans that don't require that, or just require like one quick blitz from you at some point in the game. So that isolation is pretty valuable on a map that is similarly sized, but because of the 8 locations and the fact that it becomes the distance between various places becomes not equal, it's really important to pay attention to that component as well. The other thing that I sort of learned throughout the course of this day is that I don't like trading. I don't generally like trading in the base game, but it's actually a lot better in this game, because if you have a fine setup faction or a pretty good game plan, but this one particular resource is missing because the board is not evenly constructed, then it's pretty viable to say to yourself, okay, I need to do a number of trades at the beginning of the game, but really being honest with yourself about like what those trades are going to do. If you're going to just be trading for metal to build all 4 of your mechs over the course of the game, that's like untenable, right? Like you need to find some way that you're doing it more efficiently, be it with upgrades or the Crimean power, coercion or whatever it is. Like there are a handful of other ways that a person can go through doing that I think really, really matters. I'm so animated here. I kind of want to get to the end point here. I think we're on Saxon's turn deciding to move. They're seeing that time is there, but I think I want to close this out. So we're going to do a little skip-a-roo. And here we go. We see Saxon spreading out. Just a quick 1 minute skip. Of course. And then this is a bummer for me. I kind of had extended. Well, no, I didn't extend. I just bolstered. So they actually come and attack me, which is going to cost me a couple of points. 3 points, basically, right? For losing the territory. So didn't quite expect that I would be the target because they do have double plastics there. But double plastics coming in from black means they're pretty confident in taking me out, which I think they do succeed in doing. Fortunately, we're still protected at the HQ, at the factory. And if I had 2 5s, I think I would have fought for it, but I did not. I think I had a 5 and probably a 4. I assume that there was a certain level of confidence there, but with 2 5s, confidence is, people don't necessarily expect you're going to have 2 5s, even though I had a gazillion cards. So I just kind of roll over here instead, just making sure that Russia doesn't get a free attack against me later on. I get sent home. And then we're going to see Russia essentially closing us out. Do a quick little skipperoo again. And we see basically here they come and spread out and attacking into Crimea there for a very easy win, which gives them essentially the final star to close out the game. This game I actually thought was really good. Like, it looks like Russia wins handily, and they do, but after you take the bids out, the scores are a lot closer. Actually, this is one of our closest games of the day from top to bottom, I would say. So we have Russia at 59 points, Crimea at 42 points, Polania at 53 points, Nords at 20 points, and Saxons at 37 points. So actually not a terrible loss, considering how incredibly quickly 15 rounds Russia went with a very powerful setup. A bit of 14, it takes you down, but it was, indisputably very, very good. And, if they don't get the bolster monument and get something that's kind of like a little dirtly instead, a couple of resources, that may have made the difference, right? So even just the littlest things can change anything. That's our Scythe video, y'all. I hope that you enjoyed watching this. I hope that this was helpful for you. Certainly would love to hear your comments, your feedback about this kind of structure in general too, about talking about the games. Yeah. Give me a like and subscribe if you haven't done already. Have a great day.